The static hum of the dive chamber filled the sterile server room. Dim red and silent lights pulsed along the walls, casting elongated shadows across the slumped figure in the chair. Wires slithered from the spine into cold steel ports behind them. Their eyes, already glazed, flickered behind the visor as they drifted deeper into the net. The others had cracked, one after another. Some requested transfers, others had nervous breakdowns, and a few never returned to their husk. No one should be forced to handle up to 3 rogue AIs at once. Militech didn't care. If one diver fell, another would take their place. If necessary, they all could be replaced. Professor David N., despite his growing concerns and empathy he felt toward the Netrunners, had no choice but to push forward. The project was deemed too vital. His hands trembled as he read through the latest reports. Another Netrunner lost. Another collapse. He had warned them. His corporate contact, Tamara, had brushed him off, dismissing his concerns as though they were mere distractions. But now, every warning felt more like a death sentence. The signs had been there. Melancholy, memory loss, the creeping numbness that turned into quiet, lingering despair. The higher-ups had ignored every warning. Instead of rest, they were given stimulants. Instead of safety, they were given orders. Note 7. How's the transition? The voice crackled through the narrow interface. David's voice. Always watching, always waiting. A dry tongue pressed against the roof of their mouth. Latency's increasing. I'm getting resistance. Feels like a bog. Their voice sounded distant even to themselves. A wave of cold static pressed against their thoughts. That's expected, David replied, his tone flat, portraying none of the internal conflict he felt. Proceed. The net around them was a mess of shifting, broken constructs. Fragments of the net corrupted by the very entities they were here to trap. Rogue AIs had made this place their home. Militech thought it could control them. They were wrong. They waded through the floating shards of black ice, past flickering data towers that pulsed with trapped energy. There, up ahead, 3 entities, jagged, shifting geometries that pulsed with an intelligence beyond human comprehension. Their forms twitched unnaturally, their edges fraying into distorted pixelated voids. Initiating snare protocol, they whispered, fingers moving through the holographic console before them. A lattice of digital threads shot out, winding through the void, seeking purchase on the rogue AIs. The system pulsed red as the snare locked onto 2 of them. The third hovered, observing, motionless. Note 7. Increased stabilization. David's voice crackled again. You're losing the third. Breath came ragged. Fingers twitched. They weren't losing the third, it was waiting. A deep, hollow sound rumbled through the net, something between a chime and a death knell. The rogue AI surged forward, not attacking, but invading. Abort! They shouted, feeling the flood of raw, unreadable data surge into their mind. They scrambled to sever the connection, but their hands no longer responded. Their commands turned to gibberish. Note 7. What's happening? Dave's voice was now tinged with panic. The body convulsed in the real world. The medtech scrambled, alarms blaring. David stood frozen, fists clenched, his chest tight. He wanted to shout for them to pull the plug, but it was too late to help. Inside the net, the mine unraveled. The rogue AI's tendrils coiled through icons, rewriting, consuming. The last thing they saw was the shifting digital husk of the AI, something that now looked disturbingly human. And then, darkness. Back in the dive chamber, blood streamed from their nose, their mouth, their eyes. They slumped forward, the visor cracking against the steel of the console. Their body twitched once, still. The alarms continued their wail. David exhaled slowly, watching as the techs tried and failed to resuscitate what was left. If you've ever ventured to the outskirts of Night City, specifically the Badlands, you've undoubtedly seen Militech's unmistakable green and yellow clad groups, marking the territory of one of the world's most powerful military corporations, Militech International Armaments, a name that echoes through both the streets of the NUSA and across the globe. Though they remained relatively dormant until the events of the Phantom Liberty expansion, they are undeniably one of the 3 largest military powers in the world. standing shoulder to shoulder with Arasaka and the Lazarus Group. While Arasaka controls global security and Lazarus is known for military contracting, Militech has become the world's foremost manufacturer of weapons and military vehicles. With facilities spanning every continent, Militech's reach is vast. Though, as with all megacorps, their influence extends beyond just military hardware, with their fingers in many other pies. So, we've seen Militech's troopers, equipment, and agents in action. But who's behind it all? What's the story of Militech's rise to power? And what fuels its ongoing rivalry with Arasaka? Without any further delay, let's uncover the truth of Militech International Armament. Italian weapons designer Antonio Lucchesi initially founded Armatech Lucchesi International in 1996, beginning the journey with trials for a new standardized US infantry assault weapon. Just like many founders of the 20th century, Antonio found success in the midst of ruin. Despite ongoing bankruptcy and recovery efforts from the economic collapse of 1994, the US government had decided it was time to replace the M16A2. After various trials, 3 finalists had been organized. The FN-SAP, a cheap but clunky unreliable weapon, only being considered as a result of powerful ties between the company Fabrique International and the US government, as well as its ammunition and parts compatibility with other members of the by then defunct NATO alliance. Secondly was the Colt AR-17X, an effective weapon at a high cost of production. Lastly was a compact, reliable, and moderately priced rifle hailing from an unexpected newcomer. This, of course, being Armatech Lucchesi International. U.S. Marine Corps General Donald Lundy, a member of the Joint Chiefs overseeing the trials, was sold on the Armatech system with little to no convincing needed. The combination of price, reliability, sturdiness, and accuracy spoke for itself. It was the obvious choice. That is, if it weren't for the ongoing struggles of the U.S. economy and near collapse of the government. It would go without saying that if national funds were crippled, so was the national defense budget. So despite Lundy's protest, the contracts for the new US infantry weapon system went to the inferior FN. While being passed on a government contract that could single-handedly raise Lucchesi's company to the same standing as longtime contractors, Lucchesi took the opportunity to request that Donald Lundy become CEO of Armatech, so he resigned from the Marine Corps. In the midst of the Second South American conflict, a U.S. invasion of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, U.S. soldiers had been dying in the thousands equipped with unreliable FN rifles terribly suited for the tropical climate, an unfortunate consequence of the U.S. signing Fabrique. Lundy observed this from afar. As a former Pentagon chief, he possessed a profound understanding of the modern military-industrial complex, including the extent to which older military contracting corporations had become incredibly bureaucratically top-heavy, often touting shoddy and overpriced products that sold through contractual inertia alone. In this flaw, and its ongoing devastating impact, he saw an opportunity for streamlined and efficient military manufacturing, producing high-quality, modern equipment at a competitive price, with the capability to sell technology in the global market regardless of political convention. Coupled with Lucchesi's brilliance in weapons design, this pitch allowed Armatech to acquire the capital needed to propel the company into a period of rapid expansion. Armatech's new world prominence and overt visibility came with a new name, Militech Arms International. The corporation's new structure came with a major success in 2004. Following the disaster that was the Central American Wars, the US finally scrapped the FN-SAP and began new trials for a standardized infantry assault weapon. The resulting choice? The Militech Ronin light assault rifle, followed shortly by Militech winning the military sidearm contract, directly resulting in sales of these weapons in vast quantities around the globe to nations and corporations alike. Thanks to this explosion in finances, Militech began to expand development into heavy weapon systems, artillery, armored vehicles, and even aircraft. This vast catalog, coupled with the brand's moderate prices and excellent quality, enabled the company to take on several key contracts, even winning them over established defense manufacturers that had operated through and beyond the collapse. These manufacturers had become stagnant, greedy and comfortable, allowing Militech to fill the void left behind. By the mid-2010s, Militech was the largest defense contractor in several countries, including the US, as well as being utilized by a number of corporations, all of which allowed the company to absorb a number of its now failing competitors in order to incorporate their designers and resources. However, despite great success, Militech suffered from internal problems. While Donald Lundy was never doubted in leadership or executive abilities, the board of directors did not see him in a favorable light. Lundy was power hungry and did not hide it. He was determined to make Militech the largest force on Earth. Throughout their expansion, he would recklessly aim hostility against the Japanese conglomerate Arasaka. This rose tensions between the two megacorps, with many fearing a war could break out. These decisions left the various members of the corporation in disagreement. Even Lundy's friend and ally Colonel Emil Lazarus did not favor this choice of direction, an opinion that shouldn't be taken lightly, especially on a professional standing, as the Lazarus Group had become the world's most prominent corporate mercenary force, even above the likes of Arasaka and Militech. But this tension and power struggle wouldn't simply vanish. And so, one of the many initiatives to sprout from this fear was Project Cynosure, a grand undertaking of AI research to rival the likes of Arasaka's flagship digital weapon and virus, Soulkiller, all of which was to be facilitated within Cynosure Site C, one of the many sectors constructed beneath Pacifica. The goal wasn't to create their own AI from the ground up, but use neural adaptive technologies to capture presumed rogue AIs, and to harness their capabilities for their own goals. Militech, while having the obvious armed personnel, netrunners, researchers, etc., also employed the use of the Militech Cerberus to help around the facilities for research and technology. This machine was one of the most advanced robots at the time, thanks to its unbreakable armor and subsystems for AI models. During the course of this project, all participating netrunners had begun to display signs of psychological fatigue, with increasing tendency towards melancholy, introvertedness, memory loss, mild aphasia, and depressive thoughts bordering on the suicidal. Symptoms undoubtedly linked to the experiments in which they were being forced to handle, upward of 3 rogue AI. All requests to pause testing or improve safety parameters for netrunners were promptly denied. As the casualties piled up, so did something far more dangerous to humanity: network intrusions that went as far as to abuse a major design flaw in the Cerberus units. Their AI subsystems in a facility meant to capture rogue AI, and it wasn't long until a Cerberus quote-unquote malfunctioned and killed an employee. The drugging of employees, high fatality rate, network intrusions, legality, and various factors in the outside world surely led to the project being abruptly closed down. But no official reasons were ever disclosed. By 2020, an ex-president of Militech, Elizabeth Kress, became the president of the United States, benefiting to no surprise, Militech. In 2021, during the escalation of conflict between rival aquacorps Cyno and OTEC, Militech's defense forces were contracted as supplementary support for OTEC, as well as to provide advisors, weapons, and supplies. Initially, Militech's ambitions in this conflict remained neutral and avoided direct conflict with Arasaka, who had been signed for Cyno. However, Donald Lundy turned what was meant as advertisement and demonstration of their defense services to a world market into a matter of pride and a personal vendetta to defeat the Japanese in Saburo Arasaka. Lundy considered Militech to be at war, and being a soldier for much of his life, could only view Militech's victory as Arasaka's utter defeat, an important stance that would be self-destructive later in the war. By the end of 2021, both OTEC and Cyno were engaged in naval warfare, both above and below the surface, as Arasaka and Militech moved into position and conducted early covert operations. It was in January 2022 that rumors began to spread that Morgan Blackhand had signed with Militech for the Fourth Corporate War, which is exactly what had happened. Militech had coaxed him into the fray, at a cost that exceeds even 3 covert ops teams. During this time, the war was still between Oceanic Corps, OTEC, and Cyno, but the world-renowned professional was made acting director of OTEC security operations, a promotion Arasaka felt threatened by. In response, they would execute raids aimed at thwarting operations he was personally overseeing. They denied this, but an objective of theirs was to specifically see the removal or termination of Blackhand from the war. His outstanding performance up to that point had resulted in the failure of several ambitious Arasaka operations, so they had opened a bid for his contract. But ultimately, their restitution didn't convince him to part with Militech. At the same time, Blackhand would also head a covert operations team. He got enough funding out of Militech to subcontract a group of highly skilled and motivated freelancers, making them answerable to only him. Blackhand would delegate duties to mission-compatible pairs. These mini-teams each complete their part of the mission individually, while Morgan worked independently, joining mini-teams where he's needed most. And by February 22nd, both OTEC and Sino canceled their security contracts. By the 27th, a peace accord between the two ocean-based corps had been signed. Despite this, Arasaka tested the newly completed Soulkiller 2.5 by planting it in the vehicular SmartLink processor of a Militech executive. The program worked perfectly. An interrogation of his captured mind led to an assault on Militech's Night City office. In retaliation, the Shadow War would begin in a 3-month period of covert strikes between the two megacorps. On March 31st, Militech would ask Bartmoss for help against Arasaka. Bartmoss was adamant at first, and against working for a corporation no matter how tenuous the connection. So the corporation took a different approach and contacted Alt Cunningham. She was willing to help destroy Soulkiller, though she convinced Bartmoss to join her in the effort. This contract would prove to pay off. In less than 1 month, Rache Bartmoss managed to discover the location of Soulkiller 2.5's master program. Elated, he then went on a net crime spree against Arasaka and several other non-involved corporations. In response, Arasaka put out a web of operatives assigned solely to locate Bartmoss, which happened to trace his lying during the course of one of his sprees. While Morgan desperately attempted to save Bartmoss, an asset and friend, the Militech forces moved to protect him would fail. Not entirely of their own fault though. Arasaka had sent a massive strike team to take Rache out in style. Not only that, but ended up going with the extreme backup plan in response to Morgan's team. On May 26th of 2022, they had launched a 2-meter projectile plummeting down to Bartmoss's building. Being Bartmoss, he wouldn't take kindly to his own assassination, and in response had his contingency plan activated. In the middle of the Fourth Corporate War, the net was suddenly being corrupted, seemingly at random. It would mark the beginning of the data crash. By the end of May, the covert conflict between Arasaka and Militech had escalated into open warfare, with both corps relentlessly attempting to destroy each other. Civilians, cities, and the broader world suffered as collateral damage, prompting global governments to intervene. By the fall of 2022, the governments of Southern California and the Republic of Texas took decisive action, nationalizing all Arasaka and Militech facilities within their territories. This move set a precedent with the EEC, Japan, and several other nations following suit. Arasaka's local assets were placed under Japanese government control, while Militech was formally aligned with the US government. With most of Arasaka's US forces relocating to Night City, they successfully drove Militech out, prompting Militech to abandon the city and focus on a larger plan to eradicate Arasaka entirely. During this time, Militech uncovered a secret database hidden underneath Arasaka's Night City HQ, one immune to the effects of the data crash, containing critical information that could keep Arasaka dominant while other corporations struggled with data loss. Crucially, this database had not been transferred anywhere else, meaning it was effectively trapped within Night City. Seeing an opportunity, Militech devised an assault plan to destroy both the database and Arasaka's presence in the US. On August 20th, 2023, a Militech strike force led by Morgan Blackhand and Johnny Silverhand launched an assault on Arasaka Towers to destroy the reliquary database and erase Soulkiller 3.0. The Rocker Boy Silverhand led Team Alpha, consisting of Militech Spec Ops, Aldecado mercenaries known as the Lobos, Solos, Rogue and Shaitan, Media Lyle Thompson, and Netrunner Spider Murphy. Their objective was to infiltrate the Soulkiller labs on the 120th floor, rescue Alt, and wipe Soulkiller from Arasaka's network. Meanwhile, Team Beta's mission was to reach the sub-basement where the Reliquary database and Arasaka Command Center were located, and either retrieve or destroy the data using a tactical nuclear device. Black Hand led Team Omega, composed of elite Militech operatives, including a combat Borg unit, acting as reinforcements and fire support. As the operation began, Team Alpha deployed onto the tower's rooftop, aiming for a quick descent to the lab. Black Hand was seen by one of the Lobos heading downstairs with a heavy suitcase. He wouldn't be seen again until all teams reconverged on the rooftops for extract, all of which were missing several members. Just before liftoff, Adam Smasher appeared in Power Arm, holding Shaitan's severed biopod. Black Hand, recognizing the threat, ordered his team to leave without him, and stepped out to confront Smasher. As the AV flew away, the team saw the two engage in battle atop the tower. While the Militech and Arasaka ground troops and legendary solos remained locked in a firefight, the nuclear device prematurely detonated on the 120th floor of the Eastern Tower, inside Kei Arasaka's apartment bunker, where the Soulkiller laboratory was located. The entire city and corporate district turned into ruins within seconds, with almost everyone in the immediate area dying. The blast instantly incinerated over 12,000 people in the vicinity, and fatally injured upwards of 500,000 more. Another 250,000 died in the resulting aftermath. As the detonation went off at roughly 366 meters above the sea level, the explosion was technically an air blast, and while this lessened overall long-term radioactivity, many of what remained penetrated only the huge skyscrapers around the blast area. Since much of this metropolis was built on fill, and because the elevation was originally very low, the nuke caused a minor earthquake that liquefied parts of the fill and flooded the inner city. The combined dust cloud spiraled up into the sky and turned it red with particulate matter for almost 2 years. Even many years after the explosion, suspended particles caused the sky at dawn and dusk to glow a lurid red, inspiring people who lived through that time span to call it the Time of Red. By 2024, the last known pocket of Arasaka resistance was cleaned out of the US. President Kress, wanting Arasaka to be permanently exiled from North America, engaged in a massive PR campaign to place the blame for the nuke on Arasaka. The official story held that Arasaka had kept a failsafe nuclear device in the tower and had detonated it when it was clear they couldn't win against the superior Militech forces. All of this working towards her promise of restoration under the name of the new United States of America. By 2025, Militech International Armies of the US finally quelled all of the pockets of fighting across the country, and the Fourth Corporate War was declared as officially over. Despite persisting rumors that Militech was responsible for the mini-nuke's detonation, press never addressed the concerns. Instead, she nationalized Militech and used them to strengthen their federal rule. Some of the most prominent and exonerated Militech officials were offered lucrative positions in the reformed NUSA Department of Defense. Even while Militech operated under the control of Washington, D.C. as a nationalized corporate asset, it was building itself into its former role as both an arms manufacturer and a mercenary army. Despite suffering heavy wartime losses, Militech remained one of the world's largest producers and sellers of Militech weaponry, as well as a major supplier to the reunifying new United States, while also being its largest customer. It had seemed by 2045 that the truth would never be revealed. Militech would remain evasive of any and all questions, alluding that they were responsible for the nuke, leaving only them and Lazarus as prominent military corporations in North America and even globally, largely thanks to Japan greatly restricting all Arasaka operations to their homeland. This facade, however, was bound to crumble. During the Time of Red, Rache Santiago, a young independent media, managed to obtain information about what truly went down in 2023, writing several exposés and books about the Fourth Corporate War and AHQ disaster. With this story published, titled The Big Lie, the deception created by President Kress and Militech to blame Arasaka was no more, driving Night City to realign itself with Arasaka. Despite this, many Night City citizens still believed Arasaka was responsible for the nuke, or at the very least, they were responsible for the incident, as the corporation was the reason the war reached the city in the first place. In the mid to late 2060s, Militech began working on a possible reactivation of Project Cynosure. This was a result of what I personally call the Black Wall arms race, a period of time following the construction of the Black Wall in which corps, governments, and even gangs all alike wished to probe the Black Wall and its rogue AI to get a technological advantage above all others. While this breached international law and corporate treaties, not to mention the other ethical concerns of rogue AI flooding the net, various affiliations continued to probe the outer reaches of the Black Wall. This specific project was headed by Militech research specialist Evan McRae and his co-workers, those named being Lisa Smith, Caesar, Bahires, and the twins Aurore and Almaric, who were all sent as a team to access both Cynosure Site C and D. After settling into the facility and confirming their safety, the team established a connection to the old net. Using its very own protocols and algorithms would even enable them to move around cyberspace while avoiding unwanted attention and security measures. Doing this might even allow them to approach the border of the Black Wall undetected and carefully reach beyond it. Though of course this had to be done with precision, as to avoid raising the suspicion of Netwatch. Lisa Smith, a netrunner, successfully established contact with the Black Wall using the bunker's infrastructure, but the AI immediately attempted to breach security through her Neuro interface. The team quickly responded by shutting down sections of the bunker to prevent the Black Wall from gaining control over the core, ultimately stabilizing the situation and ensuring Lisa received medical care. Despite the apparent danger, Dr. McRae insisted the project continue, believing the Black Wall's actions were an attempt at communication rather than an attack. He proposed a series of controlled interactions to further investigate its nature. Meanwhile, the Militech board, possibly fearing the unknown consequences of their work, decided to abruptly shut down the research once again. Dr. McRae was outraged, but Militech remained firm, warning that the risks were too great. The decision left lingering questions. Was the shutdown due to a reassessment of the dangers, or had rival factions like Arasaka or Netwatch intervened? Although Militech abandoned this particular project, they continued AI experiments elsewhere, including human-AI fusion, as seen in No Coincidences. In 2069, the recently elected president of the NUSA, Rosalind Myers, presented a unification program to extend federal rule over the autonomous separatist free states, under the pretense of strengthening the nation. This so-called plan could only lead to inevitable conflict, as these states obviously opposed unification. So the NUSA, backed by nationalized Militech forces and the support of Southern California and Utah, declared war on the loose alliance of free states. During this transition, Lucas Harford became the new CEO of Militech, a man who was considered to have the best characteristics of previous Militech CEOs, and a spiritual successor to General Donald Lundy. Harford is reportedly a very generous and patriotic man, making him a faithful ally of the NUSA and Myers. By early to mid-2070, federal forces had occupied every warring free state, except for Texas and North California. While Night City had managed to avoid fighting through neutrality, fears began to settle in as a NUSA detachment led by the rogue Colonel Hansen occupied Pacifica, and another NUSA Army division was sighted approaching the city outskirts. However, they were prevented from invading thanks to the actions of the then Councilman Lucius Rhine, who had asked for the exiled Arasaka Corporation for protection. Once an Arasaka supercarrier showed up in Del Coronado Bay, all NUSA forces, including FIA agents infiltrating the city, were called off. Soon after, a peace treaty was proposed and signed, officially ending the war to avoid further escalation. In 2077, Militech remained one of the world's largest manufacturers of weapons and military vehicles, maintaining close ties with American military and law enforcement agencies. After its nationalization, the NUSA used Militech's resources to stabilize its crumbling power, though the corporation later regained some independence. Many of its board members still held high-ranking positions within the Ministry of Defense. Former Militech employees played a significant role in shaping government policies, with over 60% of the company's contracts coming from the NUSA. During this period, Militech also ventured into entertainment, producing Corporate Wars the Musical, a film set during the Fourth Corporate War. The movie, which received mixed reviews, portrayed General Donald Lundy as a heroic figure while vilifying Arasaka. The plot followed Sarah, Lundy's daughter, who fell in love with an idealistic young man devoted to Saburo Arasaka. Seeing an opportunity, Saburo's son Kei secretly implanted a nuclear device in the young man's heart, intending to use him in a false flag attack against Militech. When the detonator malfunctioned, Kei resorted to killing Sarah, triggering the explosion through heartbreak. The film ended with the protagonist realizing too late that he had been nothing more than a pawn. While some praised the movie's storytelling and musical numbers, others criticized it for its melodramatic plot and blatant propaganda. But surprisingly, Militech was regarded as the second best corporation to work for, offering employees up to a 50% discount on its weaponry, and I'm sure plenty of free tickets to their musicals. Meanwhile, political tensions grew as President Rosalind Myers announced her intent to seek another term, sparking widespread protests. Formerly Militech CEO, Meyer had overseen the deep entanglement between the corporation and the NUSA, with many of Militech's top execs holding influential positions in the Pentagon. Critics feared that Militech had too much control over the government, and opposition to its dominance continued to grow. Despite these challenges, Militech pursued ambitious expansion, including the constructions of a Mars colony. The corporation began selling residential modules, positioning itself as a key player in humanity's potential future beyond Earth. However, its reliance on Washington, D.C. as its largest consumer means that if a capital ever faced financial collapse, Militech itself could be at risk. The following section contains major story spoilers for the Phantom Liberty expansion of Cyberpunk 2077, including key choices and their consequences. If you haven't played through it yet and want to experience the story firsthand, you might want to skip ahead. In Phantom Liberty, the mercenary V is drawn into a covert NUSA operation by Somi, a powerful netrunner promising a cure for the relic. But behind that offer lies a crisis, one that could either strengthen or destabilize both Militech and the NUSA, depending entirely on V's choices in Firestarter and its consequential finales. Choosing to side with Somi triggers a direct confrontation with the NUSA. V helps smuggle her to the Orbital Air Space Center and attempts to launch her off-world. The NUSA and Myers aren't so keen on their secret experiment getting out. Losing her means no more net and Blackwall superiority, as well as the risk of the Cynosure project and their rogue AI tampering coming to light, a major violation of international treaties. A successful launch risks diplomatic fallout, corporate wars, and public exposure of NUSA crimes that put the entirety of humanity at risk. The NUSA and Militech risk a corporate war with Orbital Air to try to retrieve Somi, as this would pale in comparison to losing her. On the other hand, siding with President Myers and betraying Somi lets the NUSA regain control, but not without damage. Cynosure's experiments are still a liability, and containment may only be temporary. If a tech or the rogue AI behind it escapes, the fallout could be worse than anything Militech is prepared to handle. Even in victory, the NUSA looks increasingly desperate, and Militech is stuck trying to keep order, though this is an obviously preferred outcome to an unprovoked attack in Night City, where they have no jurisdiction. Militech and NUSA forces suddenly converging on Orbital Air was really not a good look. At least in Somewhat Damaged, they get Songbird without all of it added stress if V hands her over. When it comes to the core endings of 2077, Militech's future hinges on one question: does Arasaka come out stronger or weaker? If Yorinobu Arasaka remains in power, Militech benefits. His sabotage from within destabilizes the corporation, weakening its grip on Night City and opening the door for NUSA-backed influence. Militech steps in to fill the vacuum. But if Hanako and Takemura succeed, Arasaka regains control. Their return solidifies the corporation's dominance, pushing Militech back and forcing them into a reactive position. In the Tower ending, we're given a unique glimpse into the future of Night City, one no other ending offers. The year is 2079, and without V's influence, the power dynamics in the city have shifted dramatically. Hanako and Takemura's attempt to overthrow Yorinobu fails. In the absence of opposition, Yorinobu is able to carry out his long-planned sabotage of Arasaka from the inside, effectively crippling the Megacorp. The consequences are immediate and massive. Arasaka is forced to retreat, pulling out the bulk of its operations and withdrawing to Japan. Yorinobu steps down, though many believe he was removed by the board, blamed for the internal collapse. As Arasaka reels, other corporations flood into the power vacuum, each eager to claim their piece of Night City, but one corp rises above the rest. Militech wastes no time in establishing dominance. With Arasaka gone and the city exposed, the NUSA sees an opportunity to regain control. Militech, its primary military arm, moves in fast. These prior actions, especially the death of Kurt Hansen and the destabilization of Dogtown, create a perfect opening for Militech's re-entry to the city. By 2079, Militech has become stronger than ever. Profits are at an all-time high, and the corporation has won Best Employer in Night City 3 separate years. Whether you're a paper pusher in logistics or a boots-on-the-ground enforcer, Militech is recruiting hard, especially in key areas like net running and ice defense. Militech's grip extends beyond soldiers and guns, if that wasn't obvious. The corporation now leads the market in security tech and intrusion countermeasures. New research from independent experts claim that Militech's ICE software guarantees over a 200% increase in safety for users under Netrunner attacks. Whether or not the numbers are inflated, no other corp can compete with Militech's tech dominance at this scale. One of the biggest growing concerns in Night City is the rise in cyberpsychosis cases. MaxTac, once the elite response force, is struggling to keep up. Militech sees this as an opportunity and is in the final stages of launching its own specialized unit to deal with cyberpsychos. It's another move in their ongoing strategy to replace public services with privatized, corporate-controlled alternatives. Something that the current mayor, Jefferson Perales, fully supports, as under his orders, many of the NCPD's powers are being stripped back or eliminated altogether, all in order to reduce reliance on a bloated and ineffective police force, opening the door for Militech and other corps to take over civilian protection entirely. In practice, this means more checkpoints, more surveillance, and more corporate justice. The consequence of these actions? Occupation disguised as protection. By 2079, it's no longer a question of if Militech controls Night City, it's how much. The corporation now runs major infrastructure, maintains private security in nearly every district, and enforces law without due process. Propaganda paints them as protectors, saviors of the city. But beneath the surface, there has always been unresolved mysteries, such as the sudden and unexplained drop in the city's homeless population. Official records report a significant decrease, but there's no clear answer as to why. There haven't been any major housing initiatives, and definitely no mass migration has been documented. So where did they all go? The silence from city officials only fuels speculation about secret relocations or worse. Militech in 2079 is more than a corporation. It's a regime. A force that rose from the ashes of the Fourth Corporate and Unification War, took advantage of Arasaka's downfall, and now holds Night City in an iron grip. They've become the de facto government, the military, and the law, all wrapped in one polished, heavily armed package. But if there's one thing Night City has always proven, no one stays on top forever. The city chewed up and spit out the likes of Arasaka and V. So Militech, no matter how strong they seem now, just might be next. So, what is the truth behind it all? Whether Militech is triumphing over Arasaka or remaining in fierce competition with them is a story for another place, another time, another sourcebook, or sequel game. But until then, chooms, this has been the complete story and lore behind the influential and reckless Militech Corporation. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new to expand your knowledge of the Cyberpunk universe. Leave all your thoughts and feedback down below so I can learn from you. This video ended up much longer than expected, and it was challenging to put together, especially due to the merging of NUSA and Militech assets and lore. Since the Phantom Liberty expansion had added so much, it actually got me thinking about how different some of my older videos would have been post Phantom Liberty. Maybe you'll see some of these additions in an upcoming corporation lore compilation. But until then, I hope this video turned out alright. As always, thank you to all the channel members up on screen. I appreciate all your support, even when life gets busy and I really can't upload as actively as I wish. I'm lucky in general to have viewers like you all. So make sure to have a great week, and I will see you later, chooms.